Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of this chill film discussion where we discuss films. There are no rules. We just have our thoughts, what we like, what we don't like, how we could make it better if we could make it better. Um, and today we sort of reviewed, or not reviewed, we discussed the film called Man of Tai Chi. It's a Chinese American martial arts film released in 2013. It stars and is directed by Keanu Reeves and stars Tiger Chen in the main role. And it sort of follows his journey, like the character's journey from sort of a disciple of Tai Chi, just a martial artist, into a more ruthless fighter within these underground tournaments that are being organized and hosted by Keanu Reeves' character, Dakota, or Donica. Sorry, Donica. Dakota. What do I say? Anyway, but yeah, that's the whole plot essentially. It's Tiger Chen's basically progression from innocence to ruthlessness, and of him finding his balance and trying to come to terms with that development.
Right.
So, in terms of the plot itself, it's fairly straightforward, fairly simple, fairly contained. What I liked about it was I liked his acting a lot. I think out of the cast, he was the best actor by far. There were some other characters like Keanu Reeves' character, and also another character, Sun Jin, who is sort of like there's a subplot revolving around her where she's trying to apprehend the Donica or Keanu Reeves because he's a criminal. I think their acting was a bit. I wasn't entirely convinced. I think it was a kind of overdramatic at points.
Exactly.
But I did find Keanu Reeves's overdramatic acting to be quite amusing and funny to see, even though that probably was not the intention.
Right.
But yeah, I think their acting was, I wasn't entirely convinced. There were parts that were over dramatized for sure, and but overall, like this whole film is about fighting, and I think the fighting in this film was well shot. There was a bit of let's say flashiness to it, but at least for someone who doesn't really know much about fight choreography or that much, it was very nice to see sort of like the fights within the same frame, like within the same shot. There was not a lot of cuts. There was not a lot of quick cuts, so it wasn't confusing like who was acting and who was reacting to all the punches or kicks. So that was very nice to see, and I think the parts that I had the most gripe with personally was maybe it was definitely the ending. This film itself is actually pretty efficient in terms of how it was filmed. It was very much fight to fight to fight. Not a lot of downtime, which I found refreshing because we've seen a lot of films where there's a lot of filler and they could have just been removed. Like parts of it, like whole bits of it just did not contribute too much to the film. But this one was quite the opposite. So I did enjoy that aspect actually because, there was not a downtime. It didn't drag. But in terms of the ending, I found the ending to be kind of disappointing because one, there's a whole climax. It was building up to the final fight between Donica, who is Keanu Reeves, and Tiger, and so like the main antagonist and the main protagonist. So, but the setup of the fight was very. It could have been, I think, better executed because Keanu Reeves' character kind of just walks up. He's like, "You owe me a life. Let's fight." And it's like, okay, cool, cool story, bro. Like, all right, we kind of need this fight anyway. That's true. But I also didn't really like how it ended in terms of how Tiger ended up killing Keanu Reeves' character. I felt like his whole arc was sort of to avoid that temptation of killing someone. It's like,
of going too far.
Yeah, he will always like Keanu Reeves wanted him to be a killer, And in the end, he kind of got what he wanted, and it felt unsatisfied. I felt unsatisfied with that ending because I felt like for the main protagonist, for Tiger's character development, he would have to, he did not want to kill, so like she should overcome that temptation.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but that's one
Right.
thing that I would have fixed. I would have updated. Maybe also have some stakes, like context to the fight itself, like subjugate, like Keanu comes in and maybe he kills the master, or like he brings down the master, and now like he's trying to provoke Tiger to like killing him. That would have been
Right.
nice, instead of him kind of just walking up, be like, "All right, it's time to beat up someone," whatever. So, and then also another thing that I found a bit a weak about the film was Tiger's love interest character. That character, I feel like her character didn't need to be a love interest because there was not a lot of development with her story, well, her relationship with Tiger. And the film ended with them together. So that it sort of was like, oh, this film's all about him finding balance with Tai Chi and his character development, but then it ends with like literally the weakest aspect of his story. Of course, because it's the romantic interest, and we need to have romantic interests in films. Well, we need to have those, right? um,
Exactly.
I'm being sarcastic, by the way. I couldn't tell, but yeah, I just felt like that they ended the film um, with like the weakest aspect of his character development or his character
Right.
journey, and that like it was all about him and Tai Chi and finding balance, and they didn't really need to end with her, unless the film had developed that relationship more, which it didn't really do that. So a little off-putting on how it ended. But other than that, it began very well. The beginning was very good. It was a nice hook. There was good action, and there was not a lot of filler as the movie progressed, which I appreciated. But the ending was subpar, a bit disappointing in my mind in terms of how it was executed. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Okay.
How about you, Austin? What do you want to?
Yeah. No, I think you kind of captured the same kind of things that I kind of view this movie as, right? So,
Yeah.
going over the good parts first, right? Just, this was, I think, a good story, right? Good character progression from Tiger Chen, just showing him from being this, tournament fighter, showing off his martial arts, doing his showcases, right? Or in competition to having, become more violent and doing violence for money, right? And, it's good to see his downfall and then his redemption,
Mm,
right? And that's very very good story. Very simple, right? I just didn't like the way that it was executed. Other good parts, you kind of called out was Tiger's Chen's the actor, right? I think his acting was the most believable.
hmm.
And then, as you said, I think the hook was pretty good too. The fighting was, the main part, the highlight of this film, and I love the fighting. I love traditional Chinese fighting, just the way
Yeah.
that the choreography is displayed, and even how it was edited and cut, right, and how it was shot. And you kind of you see the expertise, and it's just like long cuts, and just it's very nice to see. It's like a performance, dancing, and it's just something that's artistic, that's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Compared to whereas MMA kind of modern day fighting is just more brutal and too efficient and to the point. Whereas here it's kind of a mix of both, but it's just more flashy. It's just I think for me it's just enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
And then that's also paired with I think something I don't think I discussed earlier is just the music. I think the music was great. I like
Mm,
there's some portions where it kind of hypes you right, and it just I
yeah.
think it fits in the scenes. And sometimes it's hard to have good music during a fight scene. That's kind of complements the scene. But I think a lot of the music here, especially I think especially during the fight scene with 2 versus 1, I think that kind of really got me into it. I just enjoy that portion overall.
Yeah.
But areas where this could improve. I think it's just or just I found lacking, right? I think at least one thing that stood out to me was the writing and the acting of the other characters.
Like the dialogue.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
the dialogue, especially the English dialogue, right? I don't mind that this is a Chinese American production, right? Where you have flow from Chinese to English. That's fine, right?
Hmm.
And by for one, I think it's a little nitpick doesn't really hurt. Just having subtitles like burned into the movie instead of having to captions. At least this way you can see what the director intends to tell you, right? Otherwise, if this is a caption, I think might be outside another captioning company or editor is creating these captions, like direct translations. And the other thing is just the English portion. The English dialogue kind of seemed like like not natural, right? Because there's a portion, especially with Keanu Reeves and the other, the vlogging dude. Just every time they were on screen, their acting just seemed like over dramatic or just not natural. It just seemed that or the writing just they just seem kind of like yeah, it kind of they want to have their dialogue seem villainous and it kind of shows and it just seems really overdramatic. I just wish that the writing could have been more refined and the acting could have been toned down because they felt like they turned it up to the max here and they didn't really have to do that, right? And it felt like it was intended for a Chinese audience, which yeah, sure, it probably is because a lot of the dialogues is simple, but I don't think it kind of does a disservice to this movie to do that. I think people are smart enough, especially if you do like have the subtitles. Like even if you do the English parts, if it's showing to a Chinese audience, having Chinese subtitles, I think it would have been fine. And this movie would have been a lot more seamless. I think it's very difficult when people do a movie with multiple languages to make maybe one language seem more natural than the other, especially for the scriptwriter who maybe is not well versed in the language or trying to cater to one specific language. But I think it's better to have complex or just more natural dialogue. Have someone maybe do a read
Yeah.
over, it would have been better.
Hmm.
To make everything seem seamless. I don't understand the Chinese portions of it, but I definitely understood the English, and the English portions just did not work well for me.
Yeah.
So that I think could have done a lot more better, and maybe it would have been a more enjoyable experience.
Hmm.
Um, and I think at the same time, so another portion I think is just the pacing of this movie. We kind of talked about it, and you kind of touched upon it as well. It's just maybe going from this movie's like really really efficient, right? It goes from fight to fight as you said, and there's just some things I wanted to break, and you kind of covered it already with the fight between right after he gets disqualified to fighting the master. It's just goes right into it. Just wish there was some kind of like dialogue there, and then also as you said, I'm not going to go too much, but the fight with the ending fight with Donica versus Tiger Chen. It just he just shows up, and I wish there's something that fills there so it makes sense that he's there. Um, Donica's character at that fight scene though at the end scene, I think it would have been better to develop him as a fighter because we see him on par with Tiger Chen, and yes, we want to see Keanu Reeves fight right because he's the main
Hmm.
antagonist. We want to see him fight Tiger Chen, but there was really no indication because we see he's a businessman who fights dirty, right? And now he's able to fight on par with someone who's be able to fight all these skilled fighters. That didn't really make sense to me. I think it would be better to develop him throughout the film as a good fighter or show him fight dirty because he pulls out his knife at the end and he's playing by the rules with his fist. I think it would be better to have him have a knife or some kind of weapon, during the whole fight. And then, Tiger is able to best him with his own martial arts and Tai Chi and meditate. The
Hmm.
whole, chi power blasting was kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I think yeah, the way it ended, it probably I agree with you where it probably would have been better if he had not killed Donica, just because that was his whole arc, right? Not killing and not being as violent and being with Harmony and everyone, it would
Hmm.
have been better.
Hmm.
And then yeah, at the end, the love interest. You say you don't like the love interest. I or don't. This movie doesn't need a romantic interest. And yeah, I agree. It probably doesn't. But I wouldn't. I don't mind if it was there. I just wish it was more developed
If it
in
was
getting there,
if
right?
it was there, it had to
Um,
be more developed.
exactly, and that was my I think my main gripe. But yeah, overall, good fighting, good story, but just the execution of all was just I think could have been done so much better to make this movie could have I think had a lot of potential
Mm.
that for me felt kind of wasted because I enjoyed it. Like, the fight scenes were great. Like if you paired that with good story, I think this would have been like an amazing movie.
Hmm.
But I just think sometimes it just fell through, just the acting and whatnot,
Hmm.
and yeah.
All right. Well, what's your final jurisdiction? Let's have a rating.
Uh, yeah. I think oh, this is tough. I would say I think I'd give it a 5.5. Um, like
Okay.
the fight like this is like an average. I feel like an average. Like the story was great. Like they shot it great. That the way that they shot it was good. There's nothing like cinematography. The only thing in the cinematography that stood out to me was the strobe light. Like that pushed the editing. That really just took me away because I couldn't really watch it. But the scene was really cool. But just the strobe light itself. But just the way it was shot was great. The following the character. His story was great. The fighting was great. Just the way that was executed. Just not the best. I just wish there was more. This becomes an average movie because of all the acting and story elements and the rush. I feel like a lot of things were rushed, and maybe too efficient. I know we talk about how we want the movies have a lot of filler that's not necessary, but here it just goes to point to point to point, and yeah, I just wish it could have done more. But yeah, 5.5. And then would I recommend this to people? Probably not to like a general audience, but if you like really like martial arts films, right? If you like fight like fighting, like Hong Kong choreography and like that. Yeah, I definitely recommend because it's it has good fights, like no doubt about it. Like this is something that the choreography is really great, but just like this general story for someone to watch, I think probably not. Like this, they might not appreciate the story, the acting. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
With you, Patrick.
so I would give this film a six.
Sick.
Yes, I did enjoy it. It was above average in my opinion. Would I recommend it? Generally, probably not. But if you do like action sequences, if you do like Keanu
Hmm.
Reeves, even if you don't take him seriously, like um, it's still like a pretty decent film. Are there improvements that could be made? Oh, absolutely.
Definitely,
Um,
definitely.
but for the most part, I don't think it was a bad film. I think that it was a decent film that could have, with a little bit of at least in my opinion, and I guess also Austin's opinion, with a little bit of um, change in terms of definitely the ending, and also maybe some of the acting and dialogue as well. I think this film could have been like it could be very good. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, I give this a six because I did enjoy it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to a general audience.
right.
But if you really like fight scenes, high choreography, martial arts filmed in general, yeah, go for it. This film, I think you'll enjoy this film just for the fighting itself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I see.
um,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of fighting in this film, so that's cool. Awesome. Well, that sort of that ends our episode of Chill Film Discussion. We will see you again. I believe next week should be next week, 11 a.m. Pacific. So until then, we will see you and have a great day whenever you watch this, if you end up watching it this far.
Bye.
Cheers.